They made me kneel, 7 months pregnant, in a designer gown, in front of 300 people. My husband watched. His mistress smiled. His mother applauded. They thought they broke me. They were wrong. What they did not know, Santa Claus was watching too. And Santa was not really Santa. He was FBI. This is the story of how I went from kneeling on a marble floor to burning down a billionaire empire. Betrayal, conspiracy, murder, and the sweetest revenge you will ever hear. Stay until the end because the twist at minute 52, nobody sees it coming. If stories like this fuel your soul, hit subscribe, drop a comment, tell me would you have kneeled. Let us begin. They say Christmas is about miracles. Mine started when I was forced to my knees in a Vera Wang gown, 7 months pregnant, thanking my husband's mistress for taking care of him. 300 people watched. No one helped. But here's what they didn't know. Santa Claus was FBI, and he saw everything. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror that Christmas Eve afternoon, smoothing the green velvet over my pregnant belly. The dress had cost $4,000. Garrett insisted on the best for the Winslow Christmas Gala. 200 guests, politicians, CEOs, old Boston money, the event of the season. My phone buzzed with a text from my husband. Arrive at 7:30. I have a surprise for you. I should have recognized the warning signs. For weeks, small things had been off. My designated parking spot at the mansion had been moved. My name was missing from the seating chart until I asked about it. Garrett had been staying late at the office, coming home smelling a perfume he said was from client meetings. I told myself it was the pregnancy making me paranoid, the hormones, the exhaustion, anything but the truth I refused to see. The Winslow family mansion sat on Beacon Hill, 4 generations of old money displayed in every polished surface, and I had given up my career as a corporate lawyer 3 years ago at Garrett's request. He wanted a wife who could focus on family, on building a legacy. I believed him because I wanted to believe. Now I was isolated, no work friends. My family lived in Oregon, and Garrett had slowly convinced me they were toxic, that I was better off keeping my distance. I had not spoken to my mother in 6 months. As my driver pulled up to the mansion, I noticed the first strange thing. A Santa Claus stood near the children's photo booth in the foyer, but he was not watching the children. He was watching the adults. His eyes moved with a sharpness that seemed wrong for a man hired to say ho, 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 and bounce toddlers on his knee. I shook off the feeling and walked inside. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and white roses. A string quartet played classical Christmas music near the champagne fountain. Everything was perfect. Everything was always perfect in the Winslow world. Cordelia Winslow, my mother-in-law, intercepted me at the entrance. She wore champagne silk and diamonds that cost more than most people's houses. Her smile was too wide, too rehearsed. "Meredith, darling," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You look radiant. Pregnancy suits you." "Thank you, Cordelia. Where is Garrett?" "Oh, he is mingling. You know how he is at these events." She squeezed my arm with surprising strength. "Why do not you get some sparkling water and relax? The evening is just beginning." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. But I smiled and nodded because that was what I had learned to do. Smile, nod, do not make waves. I spotted Nadia, Garrett's younger sister, near the Christmas tree. She looked pale, nervous. When our eyes met, she started moving toward me, but Cordelia appeared at her side and steered her away with a firm hand on her elbow. The second warning sign I ignored. I got my sparkling water and found a spot near the edge of the dance floor. The string quartet shifted to a slower song. Couples began to dance. That is when I saw them. Garrett stood in the center of the floor with his hand on another woman's waist. She was younger than me, maybe 28, with dark hair and a red silk dress that hugged curves I used to have before the pregnancy weight. They swayed together like they had done this 1,000 times. The song playing was At Last by Etta James, our wedding song. The room seemed to tilt. My sparkling water slipped from my fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound cut through the music like a gunshot. Garrett looked up. Our eyes met across the ballroom. He did not stop dancing. He did not look guilty or surprised. He smiled, and in that smile, I saw the truth I had been running from for months. This was not an accident. This was not thoughtlessness. This was planned. Darling, Garrett called out, finally releasing the woman and walking toward me. You made it. Come meet Sloane. She has been keeping me company while you have been so preoccupied with the pregnancy. The room went quiet. 200 pairs of eyes turned to watch. And I stood there, 7 months pregnant, green velvet gown soaked with sparkling water, watching my entire life collapse. As I walked into that ballroom, I did not know I was walking into an ambush. I did not know my husband had spent 6 months planning this night. Not the party, my destruction. The woman in red walked toward me with the confidence of someone who had already won. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Flawless skin, perfect teeth, eyes like polished stone. A diamond bracelet glittered on her wrist. I recognized that bracelet. I had asked Garrett for it 6 months ago. He said it was too extravagant. Meredith, Garrett said smoothly, this is Sloane Prescott. Sloane and my wife. He said it so casually, like he was introducing colleagues at a business meeting, like his hand had not just been on her waist, like my world was not crumbling around me. So lovely to finally meet you, Sloane said. Her voice was polished, cultured, boarding school accent. Garrett has told me so much about you. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Champagne, a server appeared with the tray. She cannot drink, Sloane said before I could respond. She placed her hand on her own flat stomach, drawing attention to the difference between us. The baby, you know, the pity in the surrounding guests' eyes told me everything. The careful avoidance of eye contact from Garrett's business partners. The whispered conversations that stopped when I looked. Everyone knew. Everyone in this room had known about Sloane for months. Everyone except me. Have you ever had a moment where reality shifts and you suddenly see everything clearly, where every strange comment, every late night, every dismissed concern suddenly makes perfect sense? I was having that moment, standing in a puddle of sparkling water, watching my husband's mistress wear the bracelet I had wanted. Darling, you look pale, Garrett said. His voice dripped with false concern. Why do not you sit down? The stress is not good for the baby. How long? I whispered. Garrett's smile did not waver. 18 months, give or take. 18 months, a year and a half. While I had been planning nurseries and choosing baby names, he had been building a second life. Cordelia materialized at my side. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. If I could have your attention, please. The room fell silent. 200 people turned to watch. Tonight we celebrate not just Christmas, but the continuation of the Winslow legacy. Cordelia continued. My grandchild will be born in 2 months, and we also celebrate something else. Love, true partnership, the kind that builds empires. She looked at Sloane with genuine warmth, then at me with something colder. The Winslow family has always valued tradition, Cordelia said, and tonight we honor a tradition that goes back 4 generations. New members of our family must receive the family blessing. She paused dramatically. Sloane has already received hers. But Meredith, you have been with us 5 years and never properly joined the family. Tonight we correct that oversight. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I felt the baby kick hard against my ribs. What kind of blessing? I asked. Cordelia's smile widened, a simple gesture of respect, of acknowledgement. She gestured toward Sloane. Kneel before the woman who represents the future of this family. Acknowledge her position. And yours? The word hung in the air like a blade. Kneel. I looked around the room desperately. Nadia stood near the Christmas tree, tears streaming down her face, held in place by 2 security staff. Jocelyn, my best friend, was not here. She had not been invited. No one was coming to save me. Garrett stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. Do not make this difficult. Meredith, think about the baby. Think about what happens if you walk out of here with nothing. No house, no money, no custody rights. My eyes found Theodore Ashford, the family attorney. He stood nearby holding a folder. Custody papers. I realized they had already drawn up custody papers. I looked around that room at 200 faces I had smiled at for 5 years. Not one person met my eyes. Not one person looked uncomfortable. They had all known. Every dinner party, every charity gala, every holiday. They had watched me play the fool and said nothing. The marble floor looked cold, hard. unforgiving. 200 people waited. Phones emerged from pockets and clutches. They were going to record this, document my humiliation for posterity. I thought about running, but where would I go? My car keys were with the valet. My phone was in my coat at the check. I was 7 months pregnant and exhausted and completely trapped. Cordelia waited with patient cruelty. The Christmas lights twinkled behind her like a mockery of everything this holiday was supposed to represent. The family is waiting, Meredith. My legs trembled. The baby kicked frantically, as if trying to escape. I placed my hand on my belly, trying to calm us both. If you leave, Garrett murmured, stepping close enough that only I could hear. You leave with nothing. I will make sure you never see this child. Is that what you want? The threat landed like a physical blow. I knew he meant it. I knew the Winslow legal machine could crush me. I had seen what they did to business rivals, to anyone who crossed them. They destroyed people as casually as swatting flies. And I was about to become the mother of their heir. They would never let me take that child away from their control. I looked around the room one last time, searching for an ally. The faces blurred together. Some looked eager, hungry for the spectacle. Others looked uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. A few had the decency to look away. Not one person stepped forward. This is what wealth does. I realized. It makes witnesses into accomplices. It turns silence into complicity. Every person in this room who said nothing was choosing the Winslows over basic human decency. My knees buckled. I told myself it was exhaustion, the pregnancy, the shock. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. I chose to kneel because I was afraid. Because I had been slowly broken down over 5 years until I did not know how to fight anymore. The descent was the longest moment of my life. I had to lower myself carefully, one hand on my belly, the other braced against the cold marble. My pregnant body made it awkward, humiliating. The green velvet of my gown pooled around me like spilled wine. Someone laughed. A high-pitched sound quickly stifled. I would remember that laugh for the rest of my life. Somewhere in this crowd was a person who found my degradation amusing. From my knees, everyone looked enormous. I could see their shoes, designer heels and Italian leather, the kind of footwear that cost more than most people made in a month. I was eye level with their ankles, reduced to something less than human. I looked up at Sloane. She towered above me now, the power dynamic physically manifest. Her red dress seemed to glow in the Christmas lights. Up close, I could see that her expression was not triumphant. It was carefully controlled, almost uncomfortable. But she did not stop it. That was the thing about people like Sloane. They did not have to be cruel themselves. They just had to stand there and accept the cruelty done on their behalf. Say the words, Cordelia commanded. My throat closed. I could not breathe. The baby kicked so hard it hurt, as if protesting this moment, as if demanding I stand up and fight. But I had no fight left. They had drained it out of me over 5 years of small cuts, tiny humiliations, constant questioning of my reality. This was just the final blow. Sloane's expression flickered, something that might have been discomfort. But she did not stop it. She did not refuse the tribute. She just stood there, accepting what Cordelia demanded. Thank you, I forced out. The words tasted like poison. Thank you for bringing happiness to my husband. Silence. Then Cordelia began to clap. Slowly. Deliberately. Others joined. The applause spread through the ballroom like a disease. 200 people clapping for my degradation. 200 people who would go home tonight and tell their spouses about the Christmas party where the pregnant wife knelt for the mistress. Wonderful, Cordelia said brightly. What grace, what dignity. This is how a lady handles difficult situations. Garrett offered his hand to help me up. The gesture looked chivalrous to anyone watching. Concerned husband helping his pregnant wife. I stared at his hand for a long moment. The hand that had once held mine at our wedding. The hand that had touched another woman for 18 months. The hand that had orchestrated this nightmare. Then I pushed myself up without his help. It took 3 attempts. My pregnant belly made it difficult, ungainly. But I managed. I stood swaying slightly. My knees ached from the marble. The cheap pearl necklace Cordelia had given me, her gift to the incubator, hung heavy around my neck. There now, Cordelia said dismissively. That was not so difficult. Shall we continue with dinner? The crowd began to disperse. Conversations resumed. The string quartet started playing again, as if nothing had happened, as if I had not just been publicly shattered. I had kneeled. In front of everyone I had ever tried to impress. I had gotten on my knees for the woman sleeping with my husband. And the worst part of me was grateful. Grateful they did not take more. Grateful they let me stay. That is when I knew. They had not just humiliated me. They had broken something inside me I might never get back. I walked away on shaking legs. I did not know where I was going. I just needed to escape. The coat room was small and dark, filled with fur coats and designer wraps. I stumbled inside and let the door close behind me. Then I sank to the floor and sobbed. I do not know how long I sat there crying. Minutes, hours. Time had lost all meaning. The sounds of the party filtered through the door. Laughter, music, the clink of crystal glasses. They were celebrating my destruction while I fell apart among strangers' coats. My mother used to say that rock bottom was where you found out what you were made of. Sitting on that cold floor, I was not sure I was made of anything at all. Maybe I was hollow inside, and Garrett had known it all along. Maybe that was why he chose me. The door opened. I looked up expecting Garrett, or worse, Cordelia. Instead, Santa Claus walked in, not a costume performer, the actual mall Santa from the children's photos earlier. An older man, probably in his 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a very real white beard. There was something solid about him, something reassuring beneath the red velvet suit. He closed the door behind him and crouched down to my level, his knees popping with the effort. "Mrs. Winslow," he said quietly. His voice was nothing like the jolly persona he had worn for the children. It was calm, measured, authoritative. "I think you should know I am not actually Santa." I almost laughed. The absurdity of it all. Of course he was not Santa. Santa did not exist. Magic did not exist. Happy endings did not exist. "I know," I managed to say. My voice came out raw, broken. He studied my face for a moment, as if making a decision. "I am Detective Harold Brennan," he continued, "FBI Financial Crimes Division." I stared at him, processing the words but not understanding. FBI, financial crimes. The words floated around me without landing. "I have been investigating your husband for 14 months, he said. "Securities fraud, money laundering, embezzlement from Winslow Industries. We estimate he has stolen approximately $22 million. $22 million. The number was incomprehensible. That was more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. The Santa suit was my cover. Perfect way to move through the house, take photographs, document evidence without raising suspicion. No one pays attention to Santa at a Christmas party. They just see the suit." He paused, studying my face for a reaction. "But what I just witnessed out there changes everything." "What do you mean?" Detective Brennan shifted his weight, his expression grave. "That was not just cruel, Mrs. Winslow. That was coercion, emotional abuse, possibly extortion. And it happened in front of 200 witnesses, several of whom I recognized as potential witnesses in our fraud case." He pulled a small notebook from somewhere in the red suit. "Do you understand what this means? Juries need to understand who they are dealing with. A man who would force his pregnant wife to kneel and thank his mistress. That is someone capable of anything. It supports our broader case about his willingness to manipulate and deceive." I closed my eyes. Every humiliation, every degradation, reduced to evidence. Even my pain had a purpose now, a utility. I was not sure how to feel about that. "There is something else," Detective Brennan said. His voice dropped lower. "We believe they are building a case to have you declared mentally unfit after the birth. The kneeling tonight, it was designed to be recorded, documented, used against you to take custody of your child." My hand went to my belly. The baby had gone still, as if listening. "They want my baby. They want the heir. And they want you out of the way." He leaned closer. "Mrs. Winslow, I have seen this pattern before. Wealthy families who view children as assets, not people. They will do whatever it takes to control that child, including removing you from the picture entirely." For the first time that night, something other than despair stirred in my chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but something, What can I do? He handed me a business card. Plain white, just a name and number. No FBI logo, nothing official. I cannot force you to help, but if you want to fight back, I can give you the tools. Access, evidence, justice. I took the card. It felt heavy in my hand, weighted with possibility. This could be dangerous, he warned. If he suspects you are working with law enforcement, there is no telling what he might do. People with this much money, this much to lose, they can be unpredictable. He already humiliated me in front of everyone we know. What more can he do? Detective Brennan looked at me with something like respect, but there was concern in his eyes too. Mrs. Winslow, I have been doing this job for 20 years. I have seen a lot of abuse, a lot of manipulation. I have seen men destroy their wives financially, emotionally, sometimes physically. But what happened out there tonight was one of the cruelest things I have ever witnessed. The words broke something loose inside me. Validation I did not know I needed. For 5 years, I had been told I was overreacting, paranoid, too sensitive, crazy. I was not crazy. There was always something wrong. I just could not name it. Think about it, he said. But do not take too long. He is planning to move soon, maybe within weeks. We believe he is preparing to transfer the money offshore and disappear. Where would he go? We think Switzerland. He has been setting up accounts there for months. He paused. And we think he is planning to take the baby with him. The words hit me like ice water. He slipped toward the window, surprisingly agile for a man his age. Wait, I said, why are you telling me this? You could blow your whole investigation. He paused at the window, one hand on the frame. Because everyone deserves to know when they are being hunted. And because sometimes the victim becomes the best witness. Then he was gone, red suit disappearing into the snowy darkness. I sat there holding the business card, feeling the baby move inside me, feeling something else stir too. Hope. I was still sitting in the coat room, Detective Brennan's card clutched in my hand, when the door burst open again. Nadia stood there, mascara running down her cheeks, hands shaking visibly. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past hour. Meredith, thank God. I have been looking everywhere. She closed the door and locked it behind her, checking over her shoulder as if expecting to be followed. I tried to warn you, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. 3 times I sent messages. I tried to call. They intercepted everything. Mother monitors my phone, my email, everything. She has for years. She sank down beside me on the floor, her designer gown forgotten, her carefully styled hair coming undone. How long have you known? I asked. About Sloan, 6 months. About the rest, she swallowed hard, struggling to compose herself. 3 months. That is when I hired a private investigator. The rest, Nadia pulled something from her clutch with trembling fingers. A USB drive, small and silver. Meredith. Sloan is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Sloan Mercer Hayes. She has been married before, to a Greek shipping heir named Demetrios. He drowned in Santorini 3 years ago. I felt cold despite the warmth of the coat room. The fur coats surrounding us suddenly felt suffocating. Drowned. The official ruling was accidental. A nighttime swim after too much wine, they said. But the insurance payout was $8 million, and the investigation was closed suspiciously fast. My investigator found witnesses who were never interviewed, evidence that was never collected. She pressed the USB drive into my hand. This has everything. Emails between Garrett and Sloan about what they call the exit plan, bank statements from Swiss accounts, recordings of phone calls. Recordings, Mother had the house wired years ago. She likes to know everything that happens under her roof. What she did not count on was me accessing the system. She leaned closer. There are recordings of Mother discussing the custody strategy. They plan to use tonight's footage to prove you are emotionally unstable. After the baby is born, they will file for emergency custody, claim you are a danger to yourself and the child. My hand tightened around the USB drive. She is not his mistress. Meredith, she is his business partner. The affair is just cover. They are planning to steal the money and disappear. Both of them, together. Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. The kneeling was not just humiliation. It was premeditation. Evidence for court. Every moment of tonight had been choreographed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "She is your family. Your mother, your brother." Nadia's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You are my family." Her voice cracked. "Blood or not. You are more my sister than Garrett ever was my brother." She grabbed my hands, holding them tight. "Do you know what it is like growing up in that house? Mother teaching us that love is transactional, that people are assets to be managed." Garrett learned those lessons well. I watched him practice manipulation the way other children practice piano. She took a shaky breath. "I have watched them manipulate and control and destroy people my whole life. Business rivals, former friends, anyone who got in their way. I told myself it was not my problem, that I was not responsible for what they did." Her grip tightened. "But you, Meredith, you were kind to me, but when everyone else in that family treated me like a decoration or an inconvenience. You actually talked to me. You remembered my birthday. You asked about my life. You treated me like a person." I remembered those small moments. Coffee dates Garrett had dismissed as a waste of time. Conversations at family dinners that he had cut short. I had always liked Nadia. I just had not realized how much those small kindnesses had meant to her. "I cannot stand by anymore," she continued. "I will not watch them do to you what they did to Laurel." My blood ran cold. Laurel, Garrett's first wife. Nadia's face went pale. "You do not know." She closed her eyes. "Of course you do not know. They made sure of that. Know what Laurel did not die in a car accident." "Meredith, not really. She was trying to leave him. She had figured out about the financial fraud, and she was going to report it. The accident happened 2 days before she was supposed to meet with federal investigators." The courtroom seemed to shrink around me. "They killed her. I cannot prove it. No one can. The Winslow lawyers made sure of that. But I know, Meredith. I know." She opened her eyes, and I saw something I had never seen there before. "Steel. I am choosing you. I know it means losing everything. My inheritance, my position, my family. Mother will disown me. Garrett will never speak to me again. I will be cast out completely." She squeezed my hands. "But I cannot have another death on my conscience. I cannot watch them destroy another woman and tell myself it is not my problem." I looked at her. This woman I had kept at arm's length for 5 years because Garrett said she was flighty and unreliable. Another lie I had believed. "We need to be careful," I said. "They have resources, power, lawyers. That is why we need a plan." Nadia wiped her mascara-stained cheeks. "Detective Brennan, you talked to him. Did you not? How did you know? I saw him follow you. And I know who he is. I have known for months." She took a deep breath. "I have been feeding him information anonymously. Bank records, email trails, evidence of the offshore accounts." My eyes widened. "You have been working with the FBI. Someone had to." She smiled grimly. "We can do this, Meredith. We have evidence. We have federal interest. We just need to play along for a few more weeks while they build the case." For the first time, I could see a path forward. It was narrow and dangerous, but it existed. What do I need to do? Go back to the party. Pretend you are broken, compliant. Let them think they have won. And then Nadia's smile sharpened. "Then we burn it all down." I stood up, brushing off my gown. The green velvet was wrinkled and stained from the floor. I did not care anymore. I had evidence. I had an ally inside the family. I had FBI interest. For the first time, I could see a path forward. We would take our time, build the case, and when we struck, they would never see it coming. I just had to survive the next few weeks. We returned to the party separately. Nadia first, then me 5 minutes later. I kept my head down, my expression defeated. The perfect picture of a broken woman. Cordelia intercepted me near the dessert table. "There you are," she said sweetly. "Feeling better?" "Yes." I kept my voice flat, empty. "I just needed a moment." "Of course you did." She patted my arm with false affection. "The important thing is that you understand now. Your place in this family. Your purpose. I understand perfectly." "Good," she smiled. "Now go mingle. People are starting to talk." I drifted through the crowd like a ghost. People avoided me. Some whispered as I passed. I caught fragments. "Poor thing. Did you see her face? Completely humiliated. Let them talk. Let them think I was destroyed. It made the act more convincing. I found my way to a quiet corner near the Christmas tree. Through the window, I could see snow beginning to fall, perfect and pristine, covering everything in white. Meredith. Garrett's voice made me flinch. He appeared beside me, champagne glass in hand. I wanted to make sure you are all right, he said. His concerns sounded almost genuine. I am fine. Good. He sipped his champagne. I know tonight was difficult, but it was necessary. You understand that. Do you not? I understand. The Winslow family has certain expectations, certain standards, and you have never quite measured up. His voice hardened. But you are carrying my air, so we tolerate you. Be grateful for that. I said nothing, just stared at the snow falling outside. 1 more month, he continued. Then the baby is born. After that, we can discuss the future, custody arrangements, visitation rights, a comfortable settlement. He made it sound so civilized, like he was discussing a business merger, not the destruction of my life. I will sign whatever you want, I said quietly. Garrett smiled. That is my girl. He walked away, and I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. 20 minutes later, everything fell apart. I was heading toward the restroom when Cordelia stepped into my path. Her expression had changed. The false warmth was gone. In its place was something cold and dangerous. Did you think I would not monitor the coat room? My blood turned to ice. I have cameras everywhere in this house. She continued, I saw your conversation with that man in the Santa suit. Detective Harold Brennan, FBI Financial Crimes Division. My heart stopped, and I know about Nadia's little USB drive. She held up her hand. In it was the drive Nadia had given me. One of my staff retrieved it from your purse while you were wandering. I felt the absence in my pocket like a physical wound. You stupid girl. Did you think you could outsmart us? The Winslows have survived for 4 generations. We did not get here by being careless. She signaled to someone behind me. 2 security guards appeared. Escort Detective Brennan off the property. He is trespassing on private land. You cannot do that. I said, I just did. She smiled coldly. We will be filing a complaint with the Bureau. His investigation is compromised. His career is over. And you, Meredith, are going to be spending some time under observation. What are you talking about? Theodore stepped forward with papers. Emergency psychiatric hold. You are a danger to yourself and your unborn child. Your erratic behavior tonight, hiding in closets, talking to strangers about conspiracy theories. We have it all documented. This is insane. Is it? Cordelia's voice was ice. You will stay in the guest wing tonight, under supervision. Dr. Matthews will see you in the morning. After that, we will transport you to a facility that can provide the care you need. Garrett appeared beside his mother. I am sorry it came to this, darling, but you left us no choice. He took my purse, my phone, for your own safety. Through the window, I saw Detective Brennan being escorted to his car, his investigation ruined, his cover blown, and Nadia. Where was Nadia? As for your accomplice, Cordelia said, reading my thoughts. My daughter is no longer welcome in this family. Security is escorting her out as we speak. I saw her then. Nadia being dragged through the service entrance, coat thrown over her shoulders, tears streaming down her face. She caught my eye through the window. I am sorry, she mouthed. Then she was gone. In 30 minutes, I lost everything. My witness was gone. My ally was exiled. My evidence was confiscated. And I was being locked in a guest room in my own home. They had planned for everything, and I had walked right into their trap. The guest suite had been transformed into a prison. Window locks engaged, phone confiscated, a guard stationed outside the door. Through the walls, I could hear the party continuing. Laughter, music, celebration. They were celebrating my destruction while I paced the floor like a caged animal. The room was elegant in that cold Winslow way. Silk wallpaper, antique furniture, fresh flowers in a crystal vase. But the beauty felt suffocating now. A gilded cage was still a cage. The baby kicked restlessly. Responding to my distress, I placed both hands on my belly, trying to calm us both. I am sorry, I whispered. I was supposed to protect you. I failed before you were even born. The hours crawled by. I watched the clock on the mantel tick forward with agonizing slowness. 11, 11:30, midnight. Christmas Day arrived without joy. Through the window, I could see snow falling softly on the gardens below. Somewhere out there, families were gathering around trees, exchanging gifts, celebrating together. And here I was, locked in a room, waiting to be shipped off to a psychiatric facility. I searched the room for anything useful. A phone, a computer, a weapon. Nothing. The Winslows had been thorough. They had done this before. I realized this room was designed for containment, for control. Then I found it. In the back of the closet, hidden behind old boxes and garment bags, sat an ancient laptop. It was covered in dust, probably forgotten during some renovation years ago. My hands shook as I plugged it in. The battery icon appeared, still functional. No internet access. They had locked down the network, but there was a word processor. I started typing. Everything, every date, every conversation, every red flag I had ignored. The late nights, the changed passwords, the gaslighting, the slow erosion of my confidence over 5 years. If nothing else, there would be a record. If something happened to me, someone would know the truth. As I typed, I kept searching the laptop. Old files, old documents, anything that might have been left behind by whoever owned this computer before. And I found something that changed everything. A folder labeled Laurel, confidential. Laurel had been Garrett's first wife. She died in a car accident 2 years before I met him. He rarely spoke of her. When he did, his voice held what I thought was grief. Now I wondered if it was something else entirely. I opened the folder. Police reports, insurance documents, a coroner's investigation that raised questions but found nothing conclusive, and a payout, $5 million in life insurance. Laurel Winslow had died when her car went off a cliff on a coastal road in Maine. Brake failure, the report said. Accident. But the insurance investigator had noted concerns. Recent increases to the policy. A husband who stood to benefit significantly. Inconsistencies in the timeline of Garrett's whereabouts that night. The case was closed. No charges filed. The Winslows' lawyers had been very effective. I sat back, hands trembling. I was not the first. Nadia had been right. And if Sloane's first husband had also died under suspicious circumstances, then this was a pattern, a business model. They married wealthy, they extracted assets, they eliminated obstacles, and I was next. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it clarified everything. This was not just about money or custody or humiliation. This was about survival. I kept searching, kept documenting. The sun began to rise, gray light filtering through the locked windows. Christmas morning in the Winslow mansion. At 6 a.m, I heard voices outside my door. Low murmurs. Someone giving instructions. The lock clicked. I shoved the laptop under the mattress and arranged myself on the bed, pretending to sleep. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they could hear it. The door opened. Meredith. A familiar voice, not Cordelia, not Garrett, Jocelyn. I sat up. My best friend stood in the doorway, dressed in a catering uniform, her journalist's eyes sharp and alert. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked like she had not slept all night. Nadia called me at 3 a.m, she said quietly, checking the hallway before closing the door. I have been talking to Detective Brennan ever since. We have 4 hours before they transport you to the psychiatric facility. How did you get in? I told them I was with the catering company. She smiled grimly. Apparently the rich do not look too closely at the help. She moved to the window, checking the grounds below. We can not just walk out, I said. Garrett has legal authority under the psychiatric hold. I know. That is why Brennan is working with a federal judge right now. Emergency intervention order. If we can stall until 9:45, the order will be signed and the hold will be invalidated. 3.5 hours. Can you do it? I thought about the laptop under the mattress, the evidence I had found, the truth about Laurel. Yes, I can do it. Good. She handed me something small and metallic. Emergency burner phone. Keep it hidden. I will text you when the order is signed. She hugged me quickly, fiercely. You are going to survive this, Meredith, and then you are going to make them pay. Then she was gone. slipping out as silently as she had come. I lay back on the bed, clutching the phone. 3.5 hours. I just had to survive 3.5 hours. Outside, the Christmas morning sun was rising over Boston. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. I lay in bed, pretending to be sedated and compliant, while my mind raced through possibilities. At 8 o'clock, a maid brought breakfast. I ate mechanically, watching the clock. At 8:30, Garrett appeared in the doorway. "Good morning, darling." He smiled that false smile I had grown to hate. "How are you feeling? Tired?" I said, confused. "That is understandable. You have been under tremendous stress." He sat on the edge of the bed, playing the concerned husband. "Dr. Matthews will be here soon. He is going to help you get the rest you need. At the facility, it is a lovely place, very peaceful. Private rooms, beautiful grounds. You will be comfortable there. And the baby, we will make sure the baby is well cared for." Garrett's mask slipped for just a moment. His eyes went cold. "After all, the baby is what matters." I nodded meekly. "Whatever you think is best. That is my girl." He left, and I checked the burner phone. A text from Jocelyn. "Brennan with Judge now. Hold on. At 9 o'clock. Dr. Matthews arrived. He was a thin, nervous man who would not meet my eyes. Clearly on the Winslow payroll. "Mrs. Winslow," he said. "How are we feeling today? I am tired." "Overwhelmed?" "Yes, yes." He made notes on a clipboard. "Your family is very concerned about you. The stress of the pregnancy, the emotional volatility." He glanced at the door, was where Cordelia lurked. "We think a period of rest would be beneficial." I pretended to feel contractions. "Oh," I gasped, doubling over. "The baby." Dr. Matthews jumped back like I had burst into flames. "What is happening?" "Pain. Sharp pain." I clutched my belly convincingly. "Something is wrong. We should get her to a hospital," he said nervously. "Nonsense." Cordelia stepped into the room. "She is faking. I am not." I moaned. "Please, something is wrong with my baby." Dr. Matthews wavered. "I cannot risk. If she is genuinely in distress, she is manipulating you." Cordelia snapped. "I need to examine her," the doctor insisted. "If something is wrong with the pregnancy, I could lose my license." The argument bought me precious minutes. 9:15, 9:20, 9:30. Finally, Dr. Matthews concluded his examination. "The baby seems fine." False alarm. I let out a theatrical breath of relief. Thank God, I was so scared. 9:35. The transport van would be arriving soon. Then I heard it. Sirens. Multiple vehicles. The burner phone buzzed. One word from Jocelyn. Now, through the window, I saw FBI vehicles streaming up the driveway. Black SUVs. Marked cars. Federal marshals. The intervention order had been signed. What is happening? Cordelia rushed to the window. What is this? I stood up slowly, steadily. No more pretending. It is over. Cordelia. The door burst open. Detective Brendan, no longer in the Santa suit, led a team of agents into the room. Meredith Winslow. The intervention order has been signed. The psychiatric hold is invalidated. You are free to leave. This is outrageous. Cordelia sputtered. This is my house. These are my lawyers, my doctors. Ma'am, sir, Brennan said calmly, you have bigger problems than a custody dispute. He handed her a piece of paper. Federal warrant. Your son is under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Cordelia's face went white. And you, Detective Brennan continued, are under investigation for aiding and abetting. I walked past her, past Dr. Matthews, past the guards who had kept me prisoner all night, down the stairs, through the hallway, toward freedom. In the dining room, I found Garrett having Christmas breakfast with Sloan. He looked up as I entered, confusion twisting his handsome face. Meredith, what are you doing out of... Then he saw the agents behind me. Garrett Winslow III, Detective Brennan announced. You are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Garrett bolted for the back door. He made it 3 steps before 2 agents tackled him to the ground. Sloan screamed, I do not know anything. I am just his girlfriend. Actually, Brennan said, you are Sloan Mercer Hayes, and the Greek authorities are very interested in discussing your first husband's death. The handcuffs clicked around Garrett's wrists. He looked up at me from the floor, face pressed into the marble. You did this. No, I said quietly. You did. 5 years ago, when you chose to make me a victim. I just stopped being one. The next hour was chaos. Agents swarmed the mansion, securing evidence, photographing documents, seizing computers. They moved through the pristine rooms like an invading army, methodical and unstoppable. News vans arrived within 45 minutes, drawn by the sirens and the promise of scandal. Reporters clustered at the gates, cameras pointing toward the house like hungry eyes. I stood on the front steps with Jocelyn, watching the Winslow empire collapse. How does it feel, Jocelyn asked. I thought about the question. 24 hours ago, I had been preparing for a Christmas party. 12 hours ago, though, I had been on my knees on a marble floor. 6 hours ago, I had been locked in a room, waiting to be committed. And now I was watching federal agents carry boxes of evidence out of the mansion that had been my prison. Surreal, I said finally, like watching a movie about someone else's life. Garrett was let out first, handcuffed and disheveled. His perfectly styled hair had come undone. His designer suit was wrinkled from being tackled to the ground. The polished, controlled man I had married was gone, replaced by someone wild-eyed and desperate. This is a mistake, he shouted as they let him past me. I will have your badge. I will have all of your badges. Do you know who I am? He did not look at me. Even now, even in handcuffs, he could not acknowledge that I had played a role in his downfall. To him, I was still nothing. An incubator. A footnote. That was fine. I did not need his recognition. Sloane came next, screaming about her rights, demanding lawyers, threatening lawsuits. Her red silk dress from the night before was rumpled and stained. The diamond bracelet, the one that should have been mine, glittered mockingly on her wrist. I did not do anything, she shrieked. I am just his girlfriend. I do not know anything about the money. Detective Brennan stepped forward, holding a document. Ms. Mercer-Hayes, he said calmly, we have evidence of wire transfers conducted from your personal computer. We have emails in which you discuss the exit strategy, and the Greek authorities are very interested in discussing your first husband's death. New witnesses have come forward. Sloane's face went white. That was an accident, she whispered. That is what you said. Brennan's voice was hard, but the evidence suggests otherwise. They led her away, still protesting her innocence. And finally, Cordelia. She walked out with her head held high, refusing to be dragged. Even in handcuffs, she radiated cold dignity. Her champagne-colored dress from the party was immaculate. Her silver hair was perfectly styled. She looked like she was heading to a society luncheon, not a federal holding cell. You think you have won, she said as she passed me. Her voice was low, meant only for my ears. You have no idea what you have done. The Winslows have survived worse than this. Wars, depressions, scandals that would have destroyed lesser families. Maybe, I said, but you will not be around to see it. Her composure cracked for just a moment. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. Maybe. Or just the dawning realization that her perfect control had finally failed her. Then the agents led her away, and she was gone. Detective Brennan approached us, notebook in hand. He looked exhausted but satisfied. Mrs. Winslow, we are going to need you to come down to the station. Give a formal statement. I understand. We found the files you mentioned about Laurel Winslow. His voice was grave. We are reopening that investigation. The evidence you discovered on that laptop is significant, along with what Nadia provided. We have enough to build a case. They killed her. Both of them. That is what we believe. His jaw tightened. And we are working with Greek authorities on Sloane's first husband. Her yacht club alibi is falling apart. A car pulled up to the edge of the police tape. Nadia jumped out before it fully stopped and ran toward me, ducking under the yellow tape. Meredith. She crashed into me, hugging me despite the crowd of agents and reporters. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. I corrected. I could not have survived without you. She pulled back, wiping tears from her face. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had been crying all night. I realized. What happens now? Now we rebuild. The reporters were shouting questions. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed toward us like hungry mouths. Mrs. Winslow, did you know about the fraud? How long was your husband having an affair? Is it true you were held against your will? Jocelyn stepped forward, ever the journalist, handling the press with practiced ease. Mrs. Winslow will make a statement when she is ready. For now, please respect her privacy. We retreated into a waiting car, away from the chaos. The next 6 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings and healing. Garrett's trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, email communications, testimony from Theodore Ashford, who had flipped in exchange for a reduced sentence. The recordings Nadia had preserved from the house security system. The kneeling video that had been meant to destroy me became evidence of his cruelty, his control, his willingness to humiliate. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. 28 years in federal prison. He would be 70 when he got out. Sloane was extradited to Greece. The investigation into her first husband's death had uncovered new evidence. Witnesses who had been afraid to speak, financial records that showed premeditation, a life insurance policy she had convinced Demetrios to increase just weeks before his death. She was convicted of first-degree murder. Life without parole? Cordelia fought the hardest. She hired the best lawyers, filed motion after motion, claimed she knew nothing about the fraud, nothing about the murders, nothing about anything. But the evidence of her involvement in the conspiracy was damning. Her own recorded conversations, retrieved from the family servers, sealed her fate, her voice cold and calculated, discussing how to use the kneeling footage, how to have me committed, how to ensure Garrett got sole custody. 12 years. At 67, it was effectively a life sentence. The Winslow empire was dismantled, assets frozen, properties sold. The mansion on Beacon Hill went to a tech billionaire who had no interest in its dark history. And I gave birth to a healthy baby girl on a bright March morning. I named her Laurel Jocelyn Callahan. Laurel for the first wife who never got justice. Jocelyn for the friend who risked everything to save me. Callahan because she was mine. Not a Winslow, never a Winslow. She came into the world screaming, angry at the interruption, demanding to be heard. She was perfect. 6 months after that Christmas night, I sat in my new apartment in Cambridge, rocking my daughter to sleep. The apartment was small, nothing like the Beacon Hill mansion. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room that doubled as my office. But it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every picture on the wall. Mine. Laurel fussed in my arms, fighting sleep the way she fought everything. She had my eyes and her father's stubbornness, though I preferred to think of it as determination. My determination. The determination I had found on that marble floor, kneeling before my husband's mistress, deciding that I would not stay broken. Shh, sweetheart. I rocked her gently. Mama is here. You are safe. Outside. The summer sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A beautiful evening. The kind of evening that made you believe in new beginnings. My phone buzzed. A text from Nadia. Still coming for dinner on Sunday, I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. Bring wine, the good stuff. Nadia had surprised everyone, including herself. After being disowned by her family, she had thrown herself into advocacy work. She now ran a small nonprofit helping women escape abusive relationships. She had used her portion of the Winslow inheritance, the part that was not seized in the criminal proceedings, to fund shelters and legal aid services across New England. We are family now, she had said at Laurel's birth, holding my daughter with trembling hands. Real family, the kind that shows up. She showed up every Sunday for dinner. Sometimes Jocelyn joined us, sometimes Detective Brennan, now retired, stopped by to check on us. We were an unlikely family, brought together by tragedy and held together by something stronger. Choice, we chose each other. Laurel finally fell asleep. Her tiny fist curled against my chest. I carried her to the nursery and laid her gently in her crib. She stirred but did not wake. I stood there for a moment, watching her breathe. So small, so perfect, so completely unaware of the storm that had preceded her arrival. I thought about Garrett, sitting in a federal prison somewhere in Pennsylvania. I thought about Sloane, spending the rest of her life in a Greek jail cell. I thought about Cordelia, stripped of her power and her prestige, reduced to a number in an orange jumpsuit. I felt nothing for them, not hatred, not satisfaction, just emptiness where they used to live in my mind. They had tried to break me for 5 years. They had systematically dismantled my confidence, my relationships, my sense of self. They had made me kneel on a marble floor and thank my husband's mistress. And for a moment, in that coat room, sobbing among fur coats and designer wraps, I had been broken. But broken is not the same as destroyed. I returned to the living room and picked up my laptop. I was finishing my law degree online, catching up on the career I had abandoned at Garrett's request. In the fall, I would start an internship with Nadia's nonprofit, helping other women navigate the legal system that had nearly swallowed me whole. The work was hard. The hours were long. Single motherhood was exhausting in ways I had never imagined. Some nights I collapsed into bed too tired to think, and some mornings I woke up with the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. But I was alive. I was free. And I was building something that mattered. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I checked the peephole. Jocelyn stood in the hallway, holding a bottle of champagne and grinning. I opened the door. "What is this celebrating?" She pushed past me into the apartment. The book deal came through. I blinked. "Your book about the Winslow case." "Our book." She set the champagne on the counter and started hunting for glasses. "The publisher wants the whole story. The fraud. The murder conspiracy. The Christmas party." She turned to face me, her expression suddenly serious. "The kneeling, if you are willing to talk about it." I had told the story 100 times. To investigators, to lawyers, to therapists. But this was different. This would be permanent, public, a record that would exist long after I was gone. I thought about other women out there, trapped in marriages like mine. Women who doubted their own instincts. Women who had been told they were crazy so many times they started to believe it. Women who stayed because leaving seemed impossible. Maybe my story could help them. "Yes," I said. "I will talk about it. All of it." Jocelyn's face broke into a smile. She popped the champagne cork, and we toasted to new beginnings as the last light of sunset faded outside my window. 2 months later, the book came out. The Christmas I Knelt became a bestseller within 3 weeks. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from women across the country. They shared their own stories of abuse, manipulation, coercive control. They thanked me for speaking up, for making them feel less alone, for giving them permission to trust their instincts. One letter stayed with me above all others. "Dear Mrs. Callahan," it read, "I was in a marriage like yours. For 7 years, I convinced myself I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that I should be grateful for what I had. Last month, after reading your book, I finally left. I am writing this from a shelter, with my 2 children asleep beside me. We have nothing. We are starting over from zero. But we are free. Thank you for showing me that freedom was possible. Thank you for showing me that I could kneel and still rise. Sincerely, a reader." I read that letter at least once a week. It reminded me why I told my story, why I kept telling it. On Laurel's first birthday, we threw a small party. Just Nadia, Jocelyn, Detective Brennan, and a few other friends who had proven themselves true. No elaborate decorations, no string quartets, no champagne fountains, just cake and laughter and love. Laurel took her first steps that day. She had been cruising along the furniture for weeks, building courage. And then suddenly she let go of the coffee table and wobbled toward me on unsteady legs. Everyone held their breath. She made it 4 steps before tumbling into my arms. We both laughed, and she clapped her hands with delight. "She is fearless," Jocelyn observed. "She is her mother's daughter," Nadia said. I held my daughter close, feeling her warm weight against me. This tiny person who had survived everything, who had been carried through humiliation and fear and imprisonment and somehow emerged into a world that was, against all odds, filled with love. "She is her own person," I said, "and she always will be." Later that night, after the guests had left and Laurel was asleep, I sat by the window watching snow begin to fall. December again. Almost exactly 1 year since that Christmas Eve. I thought about the woman I had been, broken, compliant, so desperate to believe the lie that I had ignored every warning sign, so afraid of losing everything that I had kneeled for, people who saw me as nothing more than an incubator. I thought about the marble floor, the cold, the humiliation, The moment I felt something inside me shatter. And then I thought about what came after. The coat room, the detective, Nadia's courage, Jocelyn's loyalty, the long night, the rescue, the reckoning, the rising. They wanted me on my knees. They got me there. But here's what they did not understand about kneeling. Sometimes it is how you plant your feet before you stand. Sometimes the ground you are forced to is the same ground you rise from. I named my daughter Laurel for the woman who never got to tell her story. And every night I whisper the same promise to her. You will never kneel for anyone. You will never doubt your own mind. And if anyone ever tries to break you, remember, your mother was broken once, and she burned their empire to the ground. The snow fell harder outside my window, covering everything in white, erasing the old, making way for the new. I thought about all the women who would read my story, all the women who were, right now, trapped in marriages like mine, doubting themselves, believing the lies, staying because leaving seemed impossible. I hoped they would find their way out. I hoped they would find their Detective Brennan, their Nadia, their Jocelyn. I hoped they would discover, as I had, that the only thing more frightening than leaving is staying. And I hoped they would learn the lesson that took me 5 years and one terrible Christmas to understand. You can be broken and still be whole. You can be on your knees and still stand taller than your oppressors. You can lose everything you thought you wanted and gain everything you actually need. Laurel made a sound in her sleep. I went to check on her, found her peaceful, dreaming whatever babies dream about. I brushed a kiss across her forehead. Merry Christmas, sweetheart, I whispered, though it was still 11 months away. Your first one, and I promise you, all the ones that come after will be filled with nothing but love. She stirred, smiled in her sleep, and settled back into peaceful dreams. I returned to my window, my snow, my thoughts. The Winslows had wanted to destroy me. Instead, they had freed me. From the marriage, from the lies, from the woman I had let myself become. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that happens to you. Sometimes you have to kneel before you can stand. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, you get to watch your enemies fall while you rise. Merry Christmas to me. If this story touched something in you, if you have ever felt gaslit, diminished, or forced to make yourself smaller, I need you to know you are not alone. And your instincts, they are probably right. Hit that like button if Meredith's journey resonated with you. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit hardest. Was it the kneeling, the discovery about Laurel? The moment she finally stood up, I read every single one, and your stories matter. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is doubting themselves. Someone who needs permission to trust their gut. Sometimes a story is the push someone needs to save themselves. And subscribe, because next week I am bringing you another story of survival, strength, and sweet, sweet justice, the kind of stories they do not want you to hear, the kind that remind you breaking is not the end. It is the beginning. Remember, you can be on your knees and still rise again. I will see you in the next one.